My girlfriend broke up with me and said, "I'm not ready for something this serious," after 2 years together. I said, "I understand." And she actually looked relieved, like she expected me to fight for her or something. So I started dating again, moved on with my life, and 3 months later she called me crying. "I thought you'd wait for me to be ready." I hung up that first time, but she didn't stop, and what I discovered over the next year made me realize I dodged something way worse than heartbreak. I'm Alex, 29, project manager for a mid-sized construction firm in Denver. I had just gotten promoted when this whole thing started, decent salary, my own apartment, pretty standard life for a guy my age. She was Megan, 27, worked as an event coordinator and ran some social media on the side for local businesses. The kind of person who knew how to work a room, always had her phone out taking photos of her coffee or whatever aesthetic moment she was creating. I'm more of a function over form guy. She was all about the presentation, but opposites attract, right? We met at my buddy Josh's backyard barbecue in May, 2 years before everything fell apart. She showed up in this sundress with her hair done perfectly, even though it was like 90 degrees out, and she made a point of talking to everyone there like she was hosting the thing herself. I remember thinking she had this energy that just pulled people in. We ended up sitting on Josh's back porch talking until midnight, and our first actual date ran almost 6 hours because neither of us wanted it to end. 3 months in, she was staying at my place 4 or 5 nights a week, and I thought things were going great. That's when the small stuff started. She rearranged my living room furniture one Saturday while I was out running errands, said the layout was blocking the natural flow of the space. Then she filled my bathroom counter with about 30 different skincare products and pushed all my stuff into one drawer. My practical IKEA lamp got replaced with this vintage brass thing she found at an estate sale that barely put out enough light to read by. Every time I mentioned it, she'd smile and tell me she was just making it feel like home, and I didn't want to seem ungrateful, so I let it slide. Looking back, she was testing boundaries, seeing how much she could reshape things without me pushing back. The apartment hunt happened around the 1-year mark. My lease was ending, and she suggested we find a place together. I was looking at practical 2 bedrooms in decent neighborhoods, nothing fancy, but good bones and affordable. She shot down every single option. Too boring, too dark, no character, not in the right area. Then she found this industrial loft in a converted warehouse, exposed brick, huge windows, the whole aesthetic package. Rent was about 40% more than I wanted to spend. When I hesitated, she hit me with, "I thought you wanted to build a beautiful life with me, and then, don't I deserve nice things after everything?" I didn't even know what everything meant, but I signed the lease. We agreed on splitting it 50-50, but somehow I ended up covering utilities, internet, parking, groceries most weeks. The math never quite balanced, but she had a way of making me feel cheap for bringing it up. For about 18 months after that, things actually felt solid. We adopted a cat together, this little orange tabby we named Milo, who became obsessed with sleeping on my laptop keyboard. We had Friday night dinners with friends, weekend trips to the mountains, long conversations about kids and future plans, and where we'd travel someday. She talked about weddings a lot, showed me Pinterest boards of venues and color schemes and floral arrangements, the kind of stuff I didn't care about but nodded along with because she seemed so excited. I genuinely thought we were building towards something real. Then one night in October, I came home from a brutal day on site, some permitting issue that had set us back 2 weeks and cost the company a chunk of money. I was exhausted, just wanted to eat something and zone out in front of the TV. Megan was sitting on the couch with this serious expression I'd never seen before. Hands folded in her lap like she'd been rehearsing. She said, "We need to talk." And my stomach dropped. She went into this whole speech about needing to find herself, about feeling like she was missing out on experiences, about needing space to grow as an individual. I asked, "Is there someone else?" And she looked offended, said, "I can't believe you'd accuse me of that." Like I was the one being unreasonable. She made it sound like this mature, necessary decision, like she was doing us both a favor. Here's the part that should have told me everything. She didn't want to move out. She suggested we keep living together for 7 more months until the lease ended, said it would be too expensive for either of us to break it early. The penalty was $4,000, and she made it clear her income couldn't handle that kind of hit. I agreed because the alternative was paying her share on top of mine or eating the full penalty myself, and honestly, I was too shocked to think straight. So we became exes living under the same roof, and she framed it as us being mature adults who could handle an unconventional situation. The first week after the breakup, she started coming home late. Not midnight late, more like 2 or 3 in the morning late. She'd leave the apartment around 8 or 9 at night, always dressed up, heels and makeup and outfits I'd never seen her wear when we were together. She'd slip back in smelling like cologne that definitely wasn't mine, and when I asked where she'd been, she'd mention work events or helping friends. The thing is, I knew her friends, and none of their schedules matched her stories. None of it added up, but we weren't together anymore, so technically it wasn't my business. I stopped asking questions and started rebuilding my own life. I picked up photography again, something I dropped in college, started taking my camera out on weekends to shoot landscapes and architecture around the city. I made plans with Josh and our other friends, poker nights and fishing trips, and just getting out of that apartment as much as possible. I wasn't sitting around waiting for Megan to change her mind. I was moving forward, and I think that's what she didn't expect. Around late November, about 6 weeks after the breakup, I met Laura. She was a nurse at the hospital near my office, and we ran into each other at a coffee shop where I'd started working some mornings to avoid the weird tension at home. She ordered her coffee black, no sugar, no fancy flavors, and when the barista tried to upsell her on some seasonal thing, she just said, "No thanks, I'm good." I liked that immediately. We started talking, and I found out she worked night shifts in the ER, which explained why she was getting coffee at 2 in the afternoon. She was direct, no games, no performative social media presence, just a real person with a demanding job and a dry sense of humor. I mentioned my living situation on our second coffee meetup, told her I was sharing an apartment with my ex until the lease ended, and she just nodded and said, "That sounds complicated, but I appreciate you being upfront." No drama, no judgment, just acknowledgement. We started seeing each other casually, lunch dates near the hospital, walks in the park when her schedule allowed, nothing rushed or forced. It felt easy in a way things with Megan never had, like I didn't have to perform or prove anything. I thought I was handling everything maturely, keeping my personal life separate, respecting the weird boundaries of living with an ex. I thought I was being smart. I wasn't being smart. I was being naive. And what happened next made me realize that Megan's late nights weren't about finding herself at all. Here's what this first part of the story reveals about manipulation in relationships. Notice how Megan slowly eroded boundaries, from rearranging furniture to controlling finances, all while making Alex feel guilty for questioning it. The biggest red flag was her insisting they stay living together after the breakup, keeping financial control while claiming she needed freedom. Would you have agreed to live with your ex for 7 months? Or would that be your hard line? The late nights became a pattern I could set my watch to. Megan would leave around 9, always dressed like she was going to some upscale event, and roll back in between 2 and 4 in the morning. The apartment door would click open. I'd hear her heels on the hardwood, and she'd tiptoe to her room like I was supposed to be asleep. I started keeping a small notebook, nothing obsessive, just dates and times because the whole situation felt off, and I wanted to track if I was losing my mind or if this was actually as weird as it seemed. Thursday, she got home at 3:45. Friday at 2:15. Monday at 4:30. The pattern was consistent. The excuses were not. She'd say she was at networking events for work, which didn't make sense because event coordinators don't network at 3 in the morning. She'd mention helping friends, but the friends changed every time and the details never lined up. Once she said she'd been at a late dinner that turned into drinks, but she came home smelling like men's cologne, something woody and expensive that definitely wasn't from any restaurant. I didn't confront her because we weren't together anymore and I didn't want to look like the jealous ex, but I also wasn't stupid. Something was going on, and she was putting zero effort into hiding it from me. I focused on my own thing. Photography became my escape, and I got serious about it. I'd wake up early on weekends, drive out to Red Rocks or up to Boulder, and spend hours shooting sunrise shots and nature scenes. I started a small Instagram for it, nothing major, just a place to dump my work and maybe connect with other photographers. Josh noticed the change in me, said I seemed lighter somehow, and he was right. Letting go of Megan mentally, even while living with her physically, freed up space I didn't know I'd been missing. I was sleeping better, eating better, actually enjoying my life instead of walking on eggshells around someone else's mood. Laura and I kept seeing each other, and it progressed naturally into something more serious. She'd text me after her shifts. We'd meet for breakfast at this diner near the hospital where she'd tell me insane stories about ER patients who'd done incredibly dumb things. She met Josh and some of my other friends, fit right in without trying too hard, didn't need to be the center of attention. One night after dinner at my favorite taco place, she asked if the living situation with Megan bothered me, and I told her honestly that it was temporary and weird but manageable. She said, "Just don't let her mess with your head," and I promised I wouldn't. I really believed I had it under control. December rolled around, and Josh invited a bunch of us to this rooftop holiday party at a bar downtown. I brought Laura, figured it would be a good chance for her to meet more of my circle in a relaxed setting. The place had heat lamps and string lights, decent music, good crowd. We'd been there maybe an hour when Megan walked in wearing this red dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, hair and makeup done like she was attending a gala. I hadn't mentioned the party to her, but Josh was mutual friends with both of us, so it wasn't surprising she got invited. What was surprising was how she made a direct line toward me and Laura the second she spotted us. She came up smiling, touchy, putting her hand on my arm like we were still together, and introduced herself to Laura with this sugary tone that felt immediately aggressive. She said she was the ex, emphasized the 2 years we'd been together, made some comment about how some people move on faster than others. Laura stayed polite, but I could see her jaw tighten slightly, and Megan noticed it too. That's when I realized this wasn't a coincidence. Megan had come to this party specifically because she knew I'd be here, and she'd dressed for battle. She didn't leave us alone the entire night. Every conversation we had, Megan would drift over and insert herself, bringing up inside jokes from our relationship or memories of trips we'd taken, performing nostalgia like it was a weapon. She'd touch my shoulder, laugh too loud at things that weren't funny, position herself between me and Laura in group photos. At one point, she grabbed my hand to show someone the watch she'd bought me for our first anniversary, and I pulled away harder than I meant to. Laura excused herself to get a drink, and I could tell she was giving me space to handle it, but I also felt like I was failing some kind of test. Around 11, Megan cornered me near the bar when Laura was in the bathroom. The music was loud enough that no one else could hear us, and her whole demeanor changed. She got quiet, vulnerable, looked up at me with this expression I'd seen 100 times before when she wanted something. She said maybe she'd been too hasty with the breakup, that she'd been doing a lot of thinking, that maybe we'd given up too easily on what we had. I looked at her standing there in that expensive dress, smelling like someone else's cologne for the 3rd time that week, and something clicked. She didn't miss me. She didn't want me back. She just didn't want me moving on without her permission. I told her she didn't miss me. She missed control. Her face went cold instantly, like a switch flipped, and she said, "We'll see about that," in this tone that made my skin crawl. Then she smiled, touched my arm one more time, and walked away to rejoin the party like nothing happened. Laura came back a minute later, asked if I was okay, and I lied and said everything was fine. But it wasn't fine, and the look Megan gave me before she left that night told me this was far from over. The next morning, my phone was destroyed. 12 missed calls from Megan, all between midnight and 3 a.m. A string of texts that started apologetic and ended angry. Voice messages I didn't bother listening to. I was making coffee when she came out of her room, eyes red like she'd been crying, and immediately started in on me. She said she thought I'd wait for her, that she didn't think I'd actually move on, that she needed time but didn't think time meant I'd be with someone else. I just stared at her, waiting for the part where any of this made sense. I laid it out simply. She broke up with me. She asked for space. She'd been going out every night with whoever she was seeing, coming home at 4 in the morning smelling like someone else. She didn't get to put me on hold like a library book and expect me to sit on a shelf waiting. She tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I told her she'd made her choice, I'd respected it, and now she had to respect mine. She called me cold, said I'd changed, said the Alex she knew would have fought for what they had. I told her the Megan I knew wouldn't have played games for 3 months and expected me not to notice. She locked herself in her room after that, and I didn't see her for the rest of the day. I thought maybe that was the end of it, that she'd finally accept reality and we'd just run out the next few months in cold silence until the lease ended. I went to Laura's place that night, told her everything that happened at the party and that morning, and she listened without judgment. She asked if I wanted her to step back until my living situation sorted itself out, and I told her absolutely not. Megan didn't get to dictate my life anymore. But 2 days later, something happened that changed everything. I was home alone watching a game on the iPad we'd bought together, the one that was technically shared even though she never used it. A message notification popped up at the top of the screen, and I saw the name Daniel and a preview that made my stomach drop. I opened the Messages app, and what I found there destroyed every assumption I'd made about the breakup, about the timeline, about everything. This section shows the classic pattern of someone who wants their cake and eat it too. Megan enjoyed her freedom while keeping Alex emotionally on standby, and the moment he actually moved forward, she panicked. Her meltdown wasn't about losing him. It was about losing control over the narrative and her backup plan. Have you ever dealt with someone who only wanted you back once you stopped being available? The messages went back 5 months. 5 months meant they started 2 weeks before Megan broke up with me, which meant everything she'd said about needing space and finding herself was complete fiction. I sat there scrolling through conversations that got progressively more explicit, photos I'm not going to describe, videos that made it clear this wasn't some emotional affair that got physical later. This was calculated. There were hotel names, times they'd meet up, mentions of conferences that I now realized were covers for weekend trips. One message from early November made me physically sick, her complaining about having to keep quiet when she got home because her roommate might hear. Roommate. That's what I'd become in her story. The worst part wasn't the content, it was the dates. I cross-referenced them with my notebook, and every single late night matched up with messages to Daniel. The Thursday she got home at 3:45, she'd been at the Hilton downtown with him. The Friday at 2:15, some bar in Lodo followed by his place. She'd been lying to my face for months while sleeping in the room next to mine, and I'd been too trusting to see it. I took screenshots of everything, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that this was real and documented and not something she could rewrite later. I started paying closer attention after that. I noticed she had a pattern. Certain nights of the week she'd get dressed up, certain excuses she'd rotate through. I set up a basic security camera in the living room, one of those cheap ones you can get online, angled at the front door. I told myself it was for package theft since our building had issues with that, but really I wanted a record of her coming and going. The footage confirmed what the messages had already told me. She wasn't just seeing Daniel. There were at least 2 other guys I could identify from the times they'd walk her to the door or she'd leave with them. She'd turned our apartment into her base of operations for whatever this phase of her life was. I did some digging on Daniel through social media, the kind of surface-level research anyone can do. Took me about 20 minutes to find out he was married. His wife Rachel had a public Instagram, lots of photos of them together, pictures from their wedding 3 years ago, posts about their dog and their house in the suburbs. She had no idea what her husband was doing, same as I hadn't known what Megan was doing. I sat with that information for 2 days, going back and forth on whether it was my place to say anything. Finally, I decided Rachel deserved to know, the same way I wish someone had told me before I wasted 2 years. I sent her a message through Instagram, kept it factual and non-emotional. Included dates, screenshots with names visible, but intimate content cropped out, enough that she could verify it herself if she wanted. I told her I was sorry to be the one telling her this, that I'd want someone to tell me, and that she could reach out if she needed any other information. Then I sent it, and tried not to think about the bomb I'd just dropped into someone else's life. She read it within an hour but didn't respond, and I figured that was the end of my involvement. 3 days later, someone was pounding on my apartment door at 9 p.m. I looked through the peephole and saw a guy I didn't recognize, mid-30s, dressed in business casual, face red with anger. I opened the door with the chain still on, and he immediately started yelling, asking if I was Alex, calling me a liar and a homewrecker. It took me a second to realize this was Daniel, and he was here to intimidate me into retracting whatever I'd told his wife. I stayed calm, told him through the chain that I'd documented everything, that his wife deserved the truth, and that he should leave before I called the police. He kept yelling, trying to push the door open, saying I'd destroyed his family over nothing. That's when Megan came out of her room. She went pale the second she saw Daniel at the door, and he turned his anger on her immediately. They started arguing right there in the hallway, him accusing her of running her mouth, her trying to calm him down, both of them completely forgetting I existed for a minute. He yelled that she'd told him she was single, that she'd played him just like she played me, that his wife had kicked him out and taken everything. Then he pulled out his phone, opened up a text thread, and started reading messages out loud, her telling him she loved him, that she'd wait for him to leave his wife, promising him a future together. Megan tried to grab his phone, but he yanked it away, told her she could live with the consequences of her lies, and stormed off down the hallway. Megan just stood there shaking, and I closed the door. I contacted our apartment management the next day with documentation. The cameras had caught Daniel's outburst, plus footage of multiple unauthorized guests staying overnight, which violated our lease terms. I had records of noise complaints from neighbors about her late-night returns. The management company reviewed everything and sent Megan a lease violation notice, gave her 30 days to vacate or they'd pursue eviction. They offered me a new lease for a smaller unit at a reduced rate if I wanted to stay, no penalty for breaking the current one early. I took it immediately. Megan tried apologizing after the Daniel incident, said things had gotten out of hand, that she'd made mistakes but never meant to hurt me. I didn't engage. I'd gone through her social media posts from the past few months and noticed something else. A bunch of her aesthetic photos, the ones she posted from nice restaurants and hotels, had branded items visible in the background. Tablets with her company's logo, folders, swag from corporate events. She'd been using company resources for her personal life, probably expensing dinners and hotel rooms as business costs. I compiled everything into an anonymous email and sent it to her company's HR department with timestamps and screenshots. They could decide what to do with it. 2 weeks later, I heard through mutual friends that she'd been let go from her job. The official reason was restructuring, but the timing seemed pretty convenient. She tried calling me from different numbers, leaving voicemails about how everything was falling apart, how she was staying on her friend's couch, how she'd made mistakes but didn't deserve this. I blocked every number. She showed up at the apartment once to get the last of her stuff, asked about Milo, suggested we could share custody of the cat. I asked her when the last time she'd cleaned his litter box was, when she'd taken him to the vet, when she'd bought his food. She couldn't answer any of it because she'd never done those things. Milo was mine, same as the furniture she'd rearranged and the life she'd tried to control. Laura helped me move into the new place in January. Smaller apartment, better energy, no ghosts of a failed relationship haunting the rooms. Megan sent one final text from a number I hadn't blocked yet, said she was sorry for everything, that she understood if I hated her, that maybe someday we could talk. I replied with one sentence. You didn't change, you just don't like consequences. Then I blocked that number too. I ran into Rachel a few months later at a coffee shop, complete coincidence. We talked for a bit, awkward at first, but then easier. She'd filed for divorce, sold the house, was rebuilding. She thanked me for telling her even though it hurt, said not knowing would have been worse. We stayed in touch occasionally after that, nothing deep, just two people who'd survived something similar. Laura and I got engaged in November, exactly 1 year after that rooftop party where Megan had tried to sabotage us. Simple proposal, nothing elaborate, just honest and real. We adopted a second cat a month later, named him Pepper, and he immediately bonded with Milo like they'd always been brothers. Life got quiet in the best way possible. No drama, no games, no wondering where someone was at 3 in the morning. Just simple, honest stability with someone who didn't need to perform love because she actually felt it. Megan still exists somewhere out there, probably creating a new aesthetic for a new life. But that's not my problem anymore. Looking back, the biggest lesson here is that actions reveal character in ways words never can. Megan's whole speech about needing space was theater, a script designed to keep me as an option while she explored others. The moment consequences arrived, she wanted sympathy for problems she created. Real growth means accepting that some bridges burn because you lit the match, and no amount of apologies can rebuild what deliberate deception destroyed. When someone shows you who they really are through their choices, believe them the first time and protect your peace accordingly. What would you have done differently in this situation? And do you think telling Rachel was the right move? Or should people stay out of other people's marriages even when they have proof of betrayal?